A couple months ago, a very good friend of mine asked me this question, and it totally gobsmacked me. I came away from the question feeling like, what? Do I even know myself? Is this legit? Do I need to think about this? This is The Art of Plenty. My name is Amy McInnes, and my friend asked me if I have ADHD. Now, when she asked me that question, I had never considered it before. It was never something that was on my radar. And because this is a person that I know knows me really well and loves me, I felt like I had to give, well, not even that I felt like I had to, but I wanted to think about this idea of what is she noticing and what is it about my personality that maybe has those traits, and is this even a thing for me? Because if you've been sticking around at all, you know that one of my big things is to really know myself, and that I do a lot of self-work and I pay a lot of attention. So I'm like, could I have missed this in my 44 years on Earth? Could I have missed that I actually have ADHD? Now, I have notes today, and typically I always bring notes because that's the way that I think things out. That's the way I process. That's the way that I stay on track. And I kind of been feeling like, oh, you shouldn't take your notes to do your podcast. But today when I was writing things out, I thought, you know what? I'm going to bring my notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you know I've got my notes in front of me. I'm going to try to stay engaged with the camera because I do think that that's important. But I'm feeling like today I want to give myself grace, not just today, but forevermore, to have notes if I decide that I want them, because there's things that I don't want to forget to tell you, because some of those things I think are really key for unpacking this episode. Okay, so what did I do when I heard the question? Well, nothing other than my brain was like racing, running for weeks. And then I went to Google because, of course, that's exactly where you go when you start wondering about questions like this. And I started also, so went to Google and also started thinking about my family, because I know that ADHD runs in families. And what I discovered is that between a third and a fifth of parents who have ADHD will also have kids who have ADHD. Now, here's the deal. No one in my immediate family has been diagnosed with ADHD, but we certainly have a few of us that have some of the traits. And things have really shifted with diagnosing ADHD. And there was definitely a trend when I was a kid where a lot of kids were getting diagnosed, and maybe not so much in my age group, but the kids that were coming like 10 years after me. There was a lot more diagnosis, and there was a lot of medication that was being prescribed to kids, And what that means is that wasn't necessarily happening in my parents' generation or in my older brother's generation or people that were a little bit older than me as much as it was happening in the 90s, at least in my community. So here's something that I found from Google. Women ages 23 to 49, we've seen a doubling in diagnoses from 2020 to 2022 in ADHD. We are diagnosing adult women more frequently, like doubling it compared to what we used to. Now, ADHD has always looked different in girls than it does in boys. And when we typically think about ADHD behaviors and traits, they typically fall more into how boys act and boys perceive. So oftentimes girls aren't necessarily getting diagnosed. Now, what has actually changed? Is it that our threshold for diagnosing has changed, or is it a case of misdiagnosis? Like, why are there so many more women getting diagnosed? Because whenever I see something like that, that is exactly what stands out to me. So when we talk about threshold, we're talking about how we're changing what that criteria is so that people meet the criteria. So you may have remembered when this happened with autism. Initially, autism was not a spectrum disorder, but we changed the threshold for it to become a spectrum disorder. And what that did is it allowed a lot more people to kind of fit within that spectrum. It wasn't just this fine category. So people that before maybe had Asperger's are now fitting within that spectrum. So the change to the number of people that have ADHD could be that we're changing the threshold. Or another contributing factor is we know now that girls look different than boys when they're kids that have ADHD. So therefore, adult women would look different than adult men. And perhaps we need to rethink what constitutes ADHD. Okay, so I'm thinking about that. And I'm also thinking about this piece around misdiagnosis. Now, why that resonates for me a little bit. And you got to hear me. I am just thinking and talking here. This is not my line of work. Not that I definitely work with patients or clients that have ADHD, and I have in the past. And especially when I worked in the school system, I was working with it all the time. And I've done some coursework on it like eons ago. But this is not my area of study. And I just want to remind you that if you're feeling like, oh, this is something I need to investigate or have some questions, please do your own research. Please talk to a health professional in your community. There's a lot of good ones out there. Okay, so thinking about my misdiagnosis, here's where I got to. Or more likely, here's where I started. I was thinking about women, and I was thinking about my own life and all of the things that I have going on. And I know it's different than how women were in previous generations. We're seeing such an incredible change in how many women are leading businesses, how many women are in the top of their field, how many women are in universities compared to men. Those numbers have shifted. So, and it's been increasingly, like I don't know the actual numbers, but previously there were more men in university programs and there were more men in leadership roles, and there were more men in various careers. Now what we're seeing is that there are more women. Women are working more and doing more out of the house. Now, that hasn't shifted. What hasn't shifted is that we women still carry the mental load for our family. So what am I talking about? Well, I talk about this a lot, but that mental load is all of the things that happen that we have to do to keep our families and our life functioning the way that it needs to function for our family. That primarily falls to women. It does not mean that men and husbands are not helping out and sharing some of that mental load. It just means that the organizer, the person that's thinking all through this stuff and carrying all of the mental load of a family is primarily still women. But our careers are no longer secondary in our life. We're very career focused. And again, I'm generalizing, not all women are as career focused, but our careers are no longer a non-focus for us. A lot of women are really passionate about the work that they're doing and are focused on the work they're doing. They've gone to school for a long time to do that work. They're motivated by that work. So, and yes, they still probably work around family routines or structures. Not always, but they definitely do. And so we're carrying multiple things. And then on top of that, we have this demand for self-care, which can be stressful in itself, just doing all of the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. And I don't know about you, but I definitely feel pressure to do all of these things, like working out and eating right and taking care of my skin. And the list is endless. And if you are struggling to do all those things, I do have an accountability group that's running. Send me a DM. It's not too late to join. Okay. So, relatively new landscape for women. What happens if these situations that we're finding ourselves carrying the mental load, career focused, still having a family, what if those circumstances create a landscape where we have ADHD traits more frequently than we had in the past? That's what I've been thinking about, because a lot of those things that are on the list of ADHD, not all of them, but a lot, could be occurring because of the way that we're doing life now. It is really hard to stay focused when you got a lot going on and a lot on your plate. It's really easy to be messy or disorganized or to be stressed or to have symptoms of anxiety or depression. And just frankly, just feeling overwhelmed in the life that we're supposed to be able to live effortlessly through. So if we're changing the threshold of the diagnoses, what that combined with some misdiagnosis just because we're just doing life different, and it's not that we actually have ADHD, it's just that the life that we're living is creating a situation where we're behaving as though we do. That's what I was thinking. So I had a couple conversations with friends because I have two women in my life. Well, I have more than two women in my life, but I have two women in my life who definitely have ADHD and were diagnosed as adult women. And I had conversations with both of these women recently. Well, in the time since this question has been percolating for me. Now, one of the women that I talked with, you actually can watch a part of our conversation because I have an episode coming out in the spring that was done with TELUS Story Hive, and I interview this woman. So stay tuned and connect with me in the future because it's such a good episode and you don't want to miss it. And she unpacks how having ADHD has actually enabled her to be more successful in her business. Okay, so the other person that I had the conversation with also did not know as a child that she had ADHD, discovered when her daughter was getting diagnosed, I believe is how the story went. And it's answered so many questions for her about the way that she lives her life. It explained so much, but she really felt it was a gift to her that she wasn't diagnosed early because the way that her family raised her and nurtured her creativity, it was never a problem, but there were things that struggles that she had, and her family's perspective is we have to be creative to figure out how to support you so that you can still do the things that you need to do in life, even though you seem to struggle with such and such. Now, here are two commonalities that both of these women shared related to their circumstance. One was that they said that their brains don't shut off. There's constantly multiple thoughts going at once, which I totally relate to, but not all the time. I don't have that experience all the time. I definitely have times where I feel like I can follow one train of thought and I'm not getting bombarded with multiple. I do often have the experience of having multiple thoughts that I'm thinking at once. And that's something that I've been trying to work on because it leads to problems for me, which I'm going to get into later. The other thing that really stood out to me about these conversations with these two women is how successful they are. These women are so successful in the work that they're doing. One is in a leadership role and one is an owner of a company, which is the one I talked to you about before related to the Story Hive episode. But I really believe, knowing them well and knowing now that they have ADHD, that because of the way that their brain works, that's why they're so successful at what they do. And it's not just that. like the one friend said it was really her family really nurtured her so that it was never a detriment to her. The other one said that they can't focus in a mess. And I definitely have that experience that I struggle to stay focused when there's a mess. But here's the deal. My house is always a mess. There are 7 of us and we live in a very tiny 1-level home. We have one common area. So we have one sitting room. We have an entryway that is a combination of an entryway and a laundry room. So there is stuff everywhere all the time. And even though I'm extremely organized and have a lot of systems for putting stuff away and it doesn't matter. We are messy. I do not have an office, so I keep my papers on the edge of an island. My bedroom is always a mess, and I still have to work. So what I've done is really train myself to ignore the mess, but it's been a practice that I've had to create. And if I have to do work where I'm writing or have to be really creative and focused, I have found that I do my best work when I'm not in a messy zone. So I'll go to a coffee shop where there's like a lot of noise, and then I find that I'm able just to sink into what I'm doing without getting distracted about, oh, I need to be doing this, or, oh, I see that, I should go pick that up. So that is something that's helped me. So what is it that she noticed? Because I remember when I was early in my psych degree that when they looked at ADHD brains or people with ADHD and they looked at their brains through brain scans, the pictures were different. And the brain structures are different for a person that has ADHD versus a person that does not have ADHD. There are some parts of the brain that are larger and some parts of the brain that are actually smaller. So here's what I'm wondering. If we did, in fact, change the threshold, are those new people that now fit an ADHD diagnosis, do they still have the same brain as the people who we diagnosed previously whose brain is inherently different? Because when you get diagnosed with ADHD, they do not do brain scans. At least they don't around here. Like mostly it's talking with a physician or a mental health professional, like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and doing tests and getting information from multiple sources to build a story. Nobody's looking at your brain. And that really intrigues me because we're seeing so many more people get diagnosed recently and we're seeing so many adult women. I want to know, are our brains the same for those new people that are kind of in this? Or here's another question. Are we changing the way that our brains are because of the way that we're doing life now? I'd be fascinated to know that. Does a woman's brain look different now because of the mental load that we carry, the career focus piece? Does it look different now than it did 50 years ago? What about the technology piece? Okay, total tangent there. I'm coming back. So what did she notice about me when she asked me that question? And here's where I landed next. I thought to myself, you know what? Even if I don't have ADHD and I just have a couple of the traits, because again, the traits aren't necessarily that uncommon. I mean, anxiety is one of the pieces that could be connected to ADHD. Well, anxiety can happen for a lot of reasons. It doesn't have to do with your brain piece. But I thought that there might be something that people with ADHD do that could help me. Because she was noticing something about me. So if there's something about me that's similar to someone who has ADHD and they have a trick that helps them with that thing, can I use that trick so I can get help? This is where I was going. So when I didn't ask her. I did not ask her why she was asking me that question. And I've thought about that a few times, like, oh, I should go back and ask her why she thought that. But to be honest, she's a busy woman. She's got a lot going on in her life, and she probably has ADHD. I haven't asked her, but if she's been diagnosed, but I just haven't got to it. It hasn't seemed like a priority because I just felt like, I don't know if it's a fit. But I thought about, what is it about me that she's noticing? And here are some of the things that I do. I have elaborate organizational systems for my work and my thinking that I can't maintain. And I've really struggled to create a system. I love change and have a lot of diverse interests. I jump from different activities around if I don't like just doing one thing. So I enjoy painting, but I also love to sew. I enjoy working out, although that's relatively new. Like in the last decade of my life, I've enjoyed doing stuff like that. I've always loved doing things like skiing and going out and doing activities and being outside, but that's not necessarily my focus. I usually have 10 books on the go because I read different chapters and I go back and I think about things and then I go start a new book. I don't always finish things that I start. But I don't know if that's true because there's lots of things that I start. Like I've had this painting of a bird sitting on the top of my bookshelf for, I don't know, like 3-4 years. And yeah, I didn't finish it, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to finish it. So when I say I don't always finish things that I start, I would like to phrase it that I often pause things that I start because I get doing something else. You know, I've taken guitar lessons, I played piano for a few years, I've taken harp lessons, I've taken violin lessons. So I just like to do a lot of different stuff and I like to change things up because that keeps me interested. And I'm a creative, so I just kind of go with it and enjoy it. And I don't feel bad if I put things on hold because there are projects that I put on hold and pick back up. Like those jeans that I sewed. Those sat in my room in a basket, probably annoying my husband for almost a year because I had to order a special sewing foot for my machine. And that took a month. And then by the time it came in, my window for sewing kind of shifted and I didn't get back to it till this fall. So that is a normal part of my experience, is stopping things, pausing things, and then picking it up. But I'm sure there are a lot of things that I haven't picked up. Like my husband asked me the other day. He asked me if I finished making this quilt that I started 17 years ago. Well, the answer is no. It's still in a container with all of the pieces because, again, I ran into problems with my sewing machine and then I just got busy. So it still lives in the back of my brain and I keep thinking, oh yeah, I'll get back to that. So it's not that I don't necessarily finish things. I just don't think that's true. I just haven't finished everything that I've started. Here's the part that I think that I notice, and I don't think that my friend necessarily noticed this, but here's a part of me that I think, oh, that maybe falls into ADHD traits that actually causes me a lot of grief. And it's related to conversations. I don't always hear everything. And what I mean by that is I will gap. I will miss parts of conversations. I won't hear what's being said. I won't even notice sometimes if people are talking. Or I'll interrupt or I'll change the subject. Now, here's what's funny about that. I do not do that in counseling. Not at all. I do interrupt, but when I interrupt, it's intentional. Like if the client has been rambling for a long time or is saying something hurtful to their partner, like criticizing, I may stop it so that they're aware of the behavior that they're doing or to get the session back on track. Because you have a limited time in a therapy section. You can't just let people ramble because people will do it. They'll take the whole hour to talk about what's not important to them and then spend the last 2 minutes talking about why they're really there. So I definitely try to keep the therapy on track, but I don't gap and I don't interrupt unintentionally and I don't not hear. But it happens to me all the time in my conversations at home with my husband. In fact, it was so upsetting to me a few months ago. Well, maybe not a few months ago. Yeah, a few months ago, it was really bothering me, so upsetting to me that I actually got my hearing checked. Because I was like, am I deaf? Like, how come I'm not hearing parts of these conversations? It was so upsetting. So I went and I got my hearing checked because our hearing clinic has the best marketing. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I've been thinking about my hearing, but I've seen their marketing everywhere. And I booked an appointment, got my hearing checked. It's totally in the normal range. Now, I don't have a baseline, so I don't know if it's gotten worse over the last few years, but it is totally normal. And part of me wondered if through going through chemo, if I impacted my ears, because I remember when I was starting chemo, they told me don't get your eyes checked and don't get new prescriptions because your eyes could do all sorts of weird things. And, if you're getting your teeth cleaned, like there's so many things about chemo that you don't really know how it's going to go. So I didn't remember if they said something about hearing, but it would not have surprised me if it could impact your hearing. So I don't have a baseline. I don't know if my hearing's worse, but I know my hearing's in the normal range and there's no reason why I shouldn't be hearing things. So what's happening? So it typically happens when I'm in conversations at home. Well, guess what? I work at home. My family is at home. That's where my chaos is right now. So remember we were talking about all of the things that women do? That's where my mental load is. And I'm running tangents in my brain. I'm trying to keep organized and I'm definitely missing things in conversations. But what if it's just because of the situation? So those are the things that perhaps she noticed. Those are the things that stand out to me that maybe could be problematic. I thought regardless, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I have it. Doesn't matter if I don't have it. I'm definitely thinking that I share some of the traits, but I don't think my brain scan would indicate that I have a brain like someone with ADHD in the original scans. I don't think I fit that. I don't think I have enough of the traits. But I know I can learn something. I know I can learn something from the way they do things. And I'm like, maybe there's something there that can help me with my note system. Because I take notes all the time. I take notes for everything. I'm always writing down ideas because, again, I get a lot of ideas that maybe turn into projects but don't necessarily turn into projects. So I create this crazy organizational system to keep everything separate. And then I can't find things because I often write things down on the loose pieces of paper because it doesn't yet have a home because it's a new idea. It's been a disaster. My whole life. It's been, well, maybe not my whole life. My whole working life, the last decade, it's been a disaster working for myself. That's what I mean by the last decade. To try to find all these notes and try to keep track of it. So I've been trying to think of, I need to simplify this, and maybe there's an ADHD trick that will help me do this. One of my friends, who I think has ADHD, maybe, she takes photographs of all her notes and loads them all up into the drive. So they're all there, so she always can find them. That just sounds like I can't do that. Because I don't actually like computers that much. I don't want to be searching on stuff. I actually really prefer books and paper. I just like the way they feel. I like to write things. I like that tactile experience. So my late plan, I'm showing you my notebook if you're on YouTube. Do you see all these color tags? Something else I learned about ADHD, they like to organize by color and it's helpful. Well, that's what I do too. I decided just to keep writing everything down in one book unless I already have a project, like I have a work project so I have a workbook that's just for this one specific group of people that I work with on one of my teams. And I have a book for when I meet with them. So that kind of stuff doesn't go in here. But this is for anything that comes up. And then I color coded it based on what it fits with. So all of them are in one place. So that's my new system that I've been trying out. And this was one of the tips that they said is do not micro-organize. That was what I was trying to do before that I was failing at miserably. But simplify your organization. So I thought, okay, so the direction that I'm going is probably really helpful because these ideas pop into my head all the time. Just this morning when I was walking over here to record, I had a friend text me. She said something. It was nothing at all what I was thinking, but it gave me this idea, what she said. And now so on my way, I've got this whole new project idea percolating in my mind that I now need to write notes down. I haven't written anything down. So I keep going back to it and circling it so I won't forget. Because I do forget things. You know what was really funny about the list of things you can do with an ADHD brain? They're not really unique to ADHD. It's stuff like food, exercise, sleep. These are things we got to do all the time just to be normal, to be healthy. Like those things help with everything. They help with depression. They help with anxiety. They help with stress. Like that was nothing new. They also had things like wall calendars. Well, I already do that. Having a clear space. Well, I try to do that, but we talked about that. Use color. Again, I do this. Break down your tasks. I'm reading from my list here. Reframe, habit hacks. Yeah, I know a lot of this stuff, and I actually implement a lot of these things already. A 24-hour wait period. I do that a lot when I'm shopping. If I'm unsure about something, I don't have to do this as much because I'm better at following my gut there, my spirit there. But I used to do that all the time. If I liked something but I wasn't sure, I would wait 24 hours. And in 24 hours, I would know. And then I would do it. Now, they had this idea for a pocket note. Write a note down and put it in your pocket. That sounds horrible to me. Do you know how many pieces of paper I would have in my pocket? I mean, I'm like, did you write this list before smartphones? Because that seemed ridiculous. Another one was a Pomodoro technique. I hadn't heard about this. Work for 20, take a 5 break, work for 20. I've implemented something like that. I just didn't know it was called a Pomodoro technique. And sometimes when I really get into something, I can work a lot longer than 20 minutes without getting distracted. So the idea of that, though, is if you schedule the breaks, then you're able to stay focused when you're in it, which I thought was good. I loved this one, too. Pick the right time of day for certain tasks. I mean, I loved it. But again, this is something that I've been doing my whole life. So I started to look specifically for ADHD hacks for conversation. Because remember I said that's the one piece that actually really bothers me. And one of the things that they said is the reason why people interrupt or get distracted is because of all of those thoughts that are happening. And then they run down tangents and because they've got all these ideas that then change the conversation or they interrupt because they don't want to lose that thought. So I thought, okay. And here's some of the tips that they came up with. Use active listening. That's something I do all the time in counseling. And I know how to do it. So I thought, okay, maybe I can incorporate that and minimize your distraction. Again, when I'm in counseling, I have hardly any distraction because I'm just there with the couple. But I don't have that at home when I'm talking. And that's often when that happens the most. So I guess that's my work now is how can I create a situation at home when I'm having conversations so that I can be really present? And one of the things I've been doing lately is if I know that I can't, I just say that, hey, look, I really want to talk to you about this. This seems important, but I just don't have capacity right now to give this the attention that it needs, to give you the attention that you need. And I just had this thought right now while we're talking is maybe when there's a conversation with an individual person, maybe I can pull them into another room so that I'm not getting distracted by other people around. I can't always do that, but who knows? Maybe that'll work for me. Did you get something out of this? If you did, I want you to remember that this is not professional advice. This is just one woman telling y'all what's been going on in my brain and what I've been thinking about for the last couple months. And I hope it's helpful. I hope there's something that you can pull out of this to make your life better and to help you live the life that you were meant to live. If you have been listening and for whatever reason have been wondering if you have ADHD, I'm just throwing it out there that this is not professional advice. And if that's something that you want to pursue, find a professional in your community to do so. Because this podcast is just about entertainment and education only. I'm so glad you're here. I have had so many people reach out to me over the last couple months saying how much a specific episode meant to them or how it was exactly what they needed to hear. And that just makes me feel so good. So I'm glad that it's making a difference and that it's helping you live your best life. Because that's why I'm here. That's why the Art of Plenty exists. I'm Amy McInnes. Have a fabulous day.